Hey there, my name is Terry with Tree Marie Soapworks, and today I want to share with you my experience with the July 2023 Soap Challenge. The technique we learned is called the swing swirl, and it was taught to us by Savannah and Ryan of San Juan Soapery. And the sponsor this month was Brambleberry, so it was so nice to have them back. If you want more information about San Juan Soapery, Brambleberry, or the Soap Challenge hosted by Amy Warden, check the description below. Now let's talk about how we make a swing swirl. To make a swing swirl, you need a tool to pull through the length of your mold. That can be very basic. It can be a wire bent in the shape of a U, kind of like I did here. You can use a 3D printer to print some kind of object, or you can make your own stencil to pull through. But the idea is you pull one color into the next, and that's how the design shows up. So in order to do this, you would need to make your swing tool, and you would need to make dividers. Those dividers have to divide at the halfway mark of your regular bar size. So if your bar is 1 inch, you would need to set the divider at the 1/2 inch mark. For mine, I set each of my dividers at the 1/2 inch mark on the ruler. So starting at 1/2 inch and then 1.5, 2.5, all the way up to 10.5, because my loaf mold is an 11-inch mold. And since we are trying to get these colors to show up against one another, you really need to use contrasting colors. So in this case, I just use a classic blue and white. I love the simplicity of it. Savannah and Ryan taught us different variations, and the one that I just fell in love with was the one where you can see opposites on each side. So basically, I made dividers for my dividers. I used a plexiglass sheet and made little slots in it, and it fit right over my other set of dividers. I won't go into how I made the dividers. I have a video on making dividers that will really guide you through the process. In this case, your divisions would just be going in the opposite direction. I will talk about the dividers a little more later on in this video. Stick with me throughout this video because I will be giving little tips along the way, and I will be letting you know what I would do differently. Summer is a really busy season for me, and I spend a lot of time outside, and I love it. But oftentimes I don't get as much time to do soap making because it's really busy out there. And so I want to show you a little bit of what's going on around our place outside, and I will just give you a little view into it. And if you like it, maybe I'll continue to do this at the end of the video. So let me know in the comments if that was fun for you. To make the swing tool or the hanger tool, it's pretty easy. The wire you see here is just clothesline wire. It's plastic coated wire, and you can get that on Amazon, or you can get it at Walmart or any farm store. I believe I got mine at Rural King. And also the little tubing that I use is a 1/4 inch tubing, and I found that also at Rural King. You can buy it by the foot, and I got 2 feet here. Another place you can find tubing just like that is in the aquarium section, but I found it's a lot more expensive. The reason I'm adding the tubing to the wire is to add more surface area to pull one color to the next. If you use that little wire the way it was, you wouldn't get much drag at all. It wouldn't really show up in your bar, or it would be very thin lines. In some places you wouldn't see it at all. So I do recommend tubing to coat your hanger tool. Alright, now that we have everything prepared, let's make soap. First, I weigh out my water, and I'm using distilled water ice cubes for about 1/3 to 1/2 of the water weight, and then I top off the remaining water weight with distilled water. Next, I weigh the sodium hydroxide. When working with sodium hydroxide, it's important to follow all the safety precautions. This is a caustic ingredient. Then I weigh the sodium lactate. I'm using 1 teaspoon per pound of oils. This is an optional ingredient. You don't have to use it, but I like it because it helps the soap to release from the mold, and it also helps to make a harder bar. It's a natural ingredient, and it will be added to the cooled lye solution. Next, I carefully add the sodium hydroxide to the water. And it's always important that you add the sodium hydroxide to the water and not the other way around, or else it can volcano. Once you've added the sodium hydroxide to the water, stir it right away so that none of that sodium hydroxide settles to the bottom and forms a crust. If it forms a crust, it can be extremely difficult to get it dissolved after that. Before I weigh my oils, I make sure and note the weight of the bowl. Next, I measure the hard oils into the bowl. That includes the lard and the coconut oil. After that, I get these started melting in the microwave, and in the meantime, I start to measure my liquid oils. Here we have castor oil followed by olive oil. Next, I'm adding kaolin clay to those two oils. I stick blend them in so that they are mixed well before I add them to the bigger amount of oils. It just is easier to add them to a smaller amount and get them blended well. I use a rate of 1 teaspoon per pound of oils. I love the qualities that kaolin clay brings to soap. To me, it makes soap feel like soap. It makes it slippery and silky. There are some clays that add a gritty quality to the soap, a little bit exfoliating, but this is a very smooth kaolin clay. Be careful about how much you add because it can cause acceleration because of its absorbent qualities. For my fragrance today, I'm using a combination of essential oils. I'm using lavender and peppermint. For the total of those essential oils, I'm using 5% of my batch weight. So if my batch weight is 2,000 grams, my total of essential oils would be 5% of that, which is 100 grams. And then from there, I break it down to the percentages I'm using for the essential oil combination. And in this combination, I'm using 25% peppermint and 75% lavender. Alright, the colors are very simple today. I'm using titanium dioxide. It's dispersed in olive oil. I use a 3-to-1 mixture of 3 parts olive oil, 1 part titanium dioxide, and I used a rate of 1 teaspoon per pound of oils. If you're interested, I talked a little bit about how I mix my olive oil and titanium dioxide in my watermelon soap video. I also mentioned a little bit about fillers and how much fillers are in micas and how much fillers are in neons versus pigment. So it's really interesting to know, and it might help you a little on your usage rates to have that idea in your head about how much of it is filler. It's kind of a nerd topic, but I really find it interesting. So if you're interested, check out my watermelon soap making video. For the other half of the batter, I use blue, and I'm using ultramarine blue, and I use it at a rate of 0.75 teaspoons per pound of oils. And then I'm using a tiny bit of activated charcoal. This is activated charcoal from coconut carbon, and it's not really even detectable in a teaspoon per pound of oils amount. I just use 0.15 cc of it for this, just to bring it a little more dark than royal blue, but I didn't want to tone it down too much. Now that the coconut oil and lard is melted, I go ahead and add the cocoa butter. Since this is a butter, I am very gentle with it. I usually try to melt it by the residual of heat of the oils that are already melted. And if I can't quite get it melted that way, I microwave it till it's just barely melted, but completely clear. The reason why I'm delicate with the butters I use is because if you overheat your butters, you can cause your finished bars of soap to develop fat bloom while they're curing. Fat bloom is usually associated with recipes that have a higher content of butters, and also I feel that it very much has to do with overheating of the butters. In case you missed it there, I added the liquid oils, including the clay, to the melted hard oils. Next, I add the sodium lactate to the cooled lye solution. Here I'm checking the temperatures. I like the soap between temperatures of 85 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit, which is equal to 29 to 35 degrees Celsius. Next, I add the lye solution to the oil solution. I sometimes strain it, but in this case, I didn't think it needed straining. It looks pretty clear. Here I'm getting the weight of what's in the bowl. I've already recorded the weight of the bowl, and then you notice when I tared the scale, I had the orange spatula on there, so I didn't have to take that out. Then I take that amount that I get when I weigh the bowl and the contents, and then I subtract the weight of the bowl to get the weight of the contents. And then for this one, I'm just dividing that by 2 to get the weight for what goes in each of the containers for the blue and white batter. Here I begin to stick blend and I realize that I didn't add the essential oils. So next I add the essential oils, and note that earlier I already calculated the batch weight and I figured out half that batch weight for the blue and the white. Well, I need to add half of this essential oil weight to that total so that I can get that proper half batch weight. Next, I stick blend until the mixture is emulsified or almost emulsified. Keep in mind that you have a lot of work to do. You have to color your batter, you have to get it into the mold, which takes some time, and then you have to get the dividers out and then do the actual swirl. So there's going to be a lot of stuff that has to happen, and meanwhile your batter will be thickening up. It's important to use a slow moving recipe, and it's important to pick a fragrance or essential oil combination that moves slowly. I get the question often about how to keep your batter from accelerating, and oftentimes I think it has to do with over stick blending and lack of patience with your batter. If you're worried about your batter moving too fast, it's best to hand stir it, or at least start by hand stirring it, see what it's going to do, and if it doesn't seem to be moving along, give it some bursts with your stick blender and see how that goes, and get it to an emulsion, and then color your batter. And then after that, you may or may not need to stick blend it. As you can see here, this batter is really thin. It hasn't traced yet, so I will have to give it a stick blend. And then another way you can do it is just wait on it. Stir it, wait 5 minutes, check on it, stir it, do that process. Then when you're getting it into the mold, it's still moving very, very slow and gives you plenty of time to work. I talk about the topic of acceleration in many of my videos. Some of my videos I go into the ratio of saturated to unsaturated fats, and a lot of times my recipes that are slow moving are around 43% saturated to 57% unsaturated. That's just one thing. Usually if I look at that upper right hand corner in SoapCalc, I can see right away if it's going to be faster accelerating. The more saturated fats you have, the faster it starts to solidify. Also, don't try a new fragrance in a technique or design that takes a long time to make. Use a trusted fragrance or essential oil combination, one that you've used many times and you know how it behaves. Save those new fragrances for batches that are much more simple, and then you can take notes on it and then go from there. Another thing, you notice I have lard in my recipe. Lard is known for being slower moving. So a lot of times when I'm making batches that are more intricate and take a longer time to design, I use a recipe with lard in it. Now that the batter has traced, I go ahead and split off a little bit into my smaller pitchers with the spout on so that I can pour a little more easily. If you're new to soap making and don't know what trace means, it means when you're stirring and you lift out your spatula and you drizzle batter on top of that surface, it kind of stays on the surface and you can see the little trail of it. Next, I pour the batter in opposite sides, pouring at the same time, and notice what happens. A little bit of the batter is oozing underneath the dividers. We'll talk about some ideas on fixing that later, but to pour this, I just keep swapping the pitchers back and forth. For my first pours, I'm only pouring a little bit into each compartment. By doing this, you kind of seal off the compartments. After that, you can be a little less careful when you're pouring because it will stay where it needs to be. If I'm honest, I wasn't going to enter this in the soap challenge, and I certainly wasn't going to make a video. I was very disappointed when I cut this batch. The disappointment was mostly with what oozed underneath, and that center line wasn't crisp and defined. This presents several learning opportunities, and I want to document that here and possibly help you not make the same mistakes I did. So I have a few things I want to try for the next time. But first, let's take a look at the dividers as I pulled them out. This first set of dividers did pretty well. There wasn't that much distortion that happened, but when I removed the second set of dividers, the batter rushes to try to fill that void that is created when the dividers are removed. And as you see, that center line where the two colors come together is really distorted. Also notice how much batter is sticking to the dividers. We will talk about that later, but let's get into the swing swirl design. This swing swirl technique is a pull-through technique. Other examples of pull-through techniques are the splash swirl and the kaleidoscope technique. I have videos on those as well. To make this variation of the swing swirl design, the tool is centered and plunged all the way to the bottom. Make a pass all the way to the other side and ease it up ever so slightly and make a pass to the opposite end. And continue to do this until you're almost to the top and remove the tool. As I finish the pull-throughs, let's talk a little bit about what I would do differently for the next batch. This mold is 4.5 inches tall, and my normal bar size is 3.5 inches tall, so I needed the batter to go up to at least within an inch of the top, if not higher. I usually plane some off, and possibly it would be nice to plane some off the bottom if some batter oozed underneath. This batch was only 3 inches tall, so it was lacking at least a half an inch. I wanted to know the amount of batter that actually got into the mold, so before I cut my loaf into bars, I weighed the loaf. And I found out that only 85% of the soap got into the mold. 15% of the soap stuck to the dividers. In the future, I would increase my recipe by 15 to 25%, and I'm saying 25% because I already did increase the recipe. I estimated the waste that stuck to the dividers to be around 10%, so I already did add that in. Normally when I put my recipe into SoapCalc, to figure out that initial oil weight, I usually use 3.35 ounces of oils per bar. So in this case, there would be 11 bars. So I would take that 3.35, multiply it by 11, and then multiply that result by 1.25 to get the new oil weight. That brings me to my next point, the dividers. There are several things that I would change about the dividers. Now that you're adding some extra batter to the mold, your dividers need to be tall enough. In this case, I think my dividers are still tall enough. I made them 5.5 inches tall, and the desired bar height was only 3.5 inches tall. That was an extra 2 inches. I think that's fine. But if my batter goes beyond the top of the mold, I would need to have end caps. Every other compartment was closed, but those two end compartments were open just because they were so narrow. I didn't want to put end caps on there. For my next one, I would change that, and I would very much keep in mind that the batter needs to be fluid enough in order for that to work because of how narrow the compartment is. As you can see by the cut here, the first two were pretty ugly. They got a little better and then they got a little worse. There were air bubbles, and at this point I was very discouraged. As I continued to cut this loaf, I decided I'm not going to enter the challenge, I'm not going to make a video, I'm not going to waste any more time on this batch. But later that day I decided why not patch some of these holes, and as I was patching some of the holes I thought, well, some of these bars are alright. So I went ahead and beveled the bars, and that gave them a nice finished look. And I had one more day to get my photo taken and submitted. When I posted this soap, I got a lot of good feedback, although I feel the soap was viewed as deceivingly simple. I think because it had two colors, it was looked upon as being a little easier. That was definitely not the case. I've said this before in other videos, less is more, and when there's not too much busyness going on, you can really appreciate that design and it can really speak for itself. Lately, I've longed for the simpler designs. Kind of want to pump the brakes on getting too crazy with the colors and things. I know for the soap challenge, a lot of times the rules require you to do so, but lately I've longed for the simple. I want something to be stunning in its own rights and not busy and chaotic. Now let's get back to some of the problems that arose. The soap that oozed under the dividers is a problem, and I was really careful about making my dividers so they're level on the bottom. My cuts were very straight, but some of that still did ooze under. I looked up food grade silicone gasket material on Amazon, and I found something that I'm going to try for next time. It was a 12 by 12 sheet, and it was 1/8 of an inch thick. It looks like it would be a good gasket material to form a seal if you push down on the dividers while you're pouring. I would cut it to be the same size as the bottom of the mold. I have some more thoughts on the dividers, so before you make your own dividers, these are also things I would try next time. The material I used for the dividers was only 1/32 of an inch thick. That's less than a millimeter. That is 0.03125 inches. And I do really like that thickness. It doesn't displace as much batter and is pretty easy to cut. But with that second set of dividers sliding over the first set and not being fixed to the first set of dividers, those little divisions swayed back and forth and didn't stay fixed in the middle. I would change that and have only one set of dividers, and I would have that center division affixed permanently to the middle. Of course, keeping in mind that these are pretty small compartments, and if your batter gets too thick, this won't work very well, so it's important to keep that batter fluid. Another thing that I would change about the dividers is I would make them more narrow. That way, when you pull out the dividers, that soap batter has a place to go, and there won't be such force created because of trying to break that vacuum seal that happens. Really quickly, I want to let you know also what went right with this batch. I really like the color combination of the blue and white, and I think you could use any color with white that is dark enough. You want to make sure there's enough contrast, but white with, say, burgundy, white with black, white with an adobe color, white with teal, white with a darker brown. Those would be some other combinations that I would try. Another thing that went well was the recipe, and that includes the base recipe that has lard in it, which is slow moving, and also the ratio of 43% saturated fats to 57% unsaturated fats. Also included within the recipe, the essential oil combination worked very well, was very slow moving, and I would recommend it. Also, the kaolin clay did not cause acceleration, and I was really glad to get kaolin clay in this batch. Another thing that worked excellent, and I wouldn't change a thing, is that swing tool. It worked great with the clothesline wire covered with that 1/4-inch tubing. And the bend was great too. I really liked that rounded out V shape. And I feel that making this design in a tall and skinny mold as opposed to a regular loaf mold makes this design much more regal and statuesque. Also, the setup for the photo worked well. The lighting at that time of the day, which was around 2:30 p.m., worked really well. At that time of the day, the lighting has less of a yellow color cast. It's more of a white color cast, which is truer. And I got some new backgrounds and they really worked out well. Thank you for sticking with me, and stick with me a little longer if you want to see our chickens. That's another part of our life that we love. As for my channel, if you're new, please subscribe so you won't miss anything. I love doing this trial and error and learning from my mistakes and sharing what I learned with you so that you maybe won't have to make the same mistakes I did. If you would appreciate more videos like this, please hit the like button. If you have any questions or want to leave feedback or just want to give some encouragement, please write that in the comments below. I read all your comments and I try to answer questions when possible. I'm also curious if you like the end part that I'm adding here today that I've never done before, so I would like your feedback on if you liked seeing a little bit of our life outside of soap making. So leave that in the comments below as well. I try to answer the questions, but sometimes I don't get to everything. If you want the question answered, a more likely way to get it answered is if you join my group and ask in the group. There are many other people that like to answer questions in there, and sometimes I hop on there and answer questions as well. My group is called Tree Marie Soapworks. Make sure you look for the group and not the page. The page is my business page. You can follow that as well. But if you want to join the group, it's strictly for soap making, no other cosmetics. But it's for learning, sharing, troubleshooting, asking questions, and encouraging others. It covers cold process soap mainly, but you can ask questions about other types of soap in there too. Those are welcome. It's a private group, so if you would like to join, you have to request to join. You have to read the rules, agree to the rules, and answer the questions to be let into the group. I have to do a little filtering because sometimes people have bad intentions. So I want to know that you're here for soap making. Thank you for being here. Real quick, I want to let you know that the volume is really low in this video. I'm so sorry. I will try to fix that in future videos if you like these kind of videos. So you'll have to turn the volume up. But enjoy, and I will see you back here next time. This is an Americana, and so is this. Look how different they are. And our gorgeous one over there. Look at this one. And that's a Polish rooster with a female Polish. These are only 4 and 3 months old. The Silkies are 4 months old. And let's show you the rooster. It's like the littlest one. It's weird, but it does crow. It's just started crowing. Silkies have those blue earlobes. They're really cool. See that blue? But that's the rooster. He probably won't crow for you. He only does it like select times of the day. Here's another Polish. Look at their feet. They have this polydactyly, I think it's called. Lots of feathers on their feet. It's really cool. Very interesting. Is a Polish mama? Will be a mama. Not laying eggs yet. That one is just a gorgeous Americana. Right there, and that one. And this guy, I think, we think it's a rooster. It's gotta be. It's so different than the other two. Got that red mouth, crazy hair, I say, and then the tail feathers stick up all the time, and these other ones don't. Look at, they look so funny sitting down. Don't you, girl? You look funny sitting down. Anyway, those are our new girls. Well, And maybe 2 roosters, we think. Okay. They're so fun to watch. They do such silly things. The eyes are on the side, so it looks like they don't have eyes. They are on the side, and they do have a little trouble seeing more than others. But same with the Polish, they're crazy. Okay, let's look at our other. Let's go look at our other ones. I'm not gonna let you out this time. I just love these girls. So pretty. I'll get this shot this time. Girls. They're very friendly. We have Barred Rocks, we have New Hampshires, we have Isa Browns, we have Rhode Island Reds. Let's see, there's a Gold Lace and Silver Lace Wyandotte. And I think we have around 18 girls. We get about a dozen eggs a day. Some of these girls are older. But anyway, got them a pool because it's so hot outside. So they drink out of the pool outside. But I think they're so pretty.